Right. And Christine, do you want to send out another message in chat with the handouts?
I absolutely will. And I sent out a message too in your email, folks. So if you have any difficulty accessing the link in the chat, it should be in your email, fresh and top of the box this morning. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the extended special version after the release of the eligible services list. Uh, Now, with brand new information about Category 2 for the next few years here. And Lori, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So as Christine mentioned, we went through Form 470 training, but because of the eligible service list, we knew some changes were coming or hope were coming, but when we did the training previously, we didn't know for sure. So today we're going to be focusing on those changes and how that will impact us moving forward, and it's all for the good. All right, but just so you understand, what this means and how you go about filing for the service. So we'll jump in. Now, first thing we want to cover all the important filing dates, all right? Because when the eligible service list was announced, so did the FCC announce the opening of the 471 window, all of those deadlines. So the first piece to be aware is this upcoming January 16th deadline. So this is around the administrative window. This is the period of time when the portal is open, where we can go in and update things like addresses, square footage, all right, that kind of detail, add new users. All right, because after the 16th, after that deadline, if you need to make a change, you would have to create a customer service case with USAC and have them implement the change on your behalf. All right, because literally those fields in the portal are locked down. All right, so again, January 16th is the close of the administrative window. We've asked the question of USAC, what time? Is that at noon? Is it at midnight? Right, we don't know that yet. All right, so hopefully I'll find that information out here pretty soon. Okay, a couple of other things to be aware of, and again, if you've attended training, you know this by now, but just a refresher. So the C2, the category 2 budget data has been updated because this upcoming 2026 funding year starts the new 5-year budget cycle. All right. So for our libraries, it's going to be based on $5.43 per square foot. All right. So you just look at all of your library branches, including a bookmobile, right? And you just, the system, right, just adds up all the square footage that you've provided in the portal. All right. It looks at that lump sum total and then multiplies it by that number of the square footage, all right, to calculate your 5-year budget. Keep in mind, though, that budget is what we call a pre-discount budget, meaning that let's say your budget comes out to $100,000. All right. And your E-rate discount rate is 80%. That means that if over this upcoming, 5-year budget cycle, if you spend up to the $100,000, you'll get back 80% of that. All right. Keep in mind, you are never, ever going to receive 100% of that budget amount. You're going to receive back whatever your discount rate is. This is something that has been really confusing since Cat 2, started. All right, excuse me. All right, so just to be aware. Now, funding floor, if you have a small library location, then it's basically anything that falls below 5,557 square feet, such as a bookmobile, right? Or, really small library branch. Then you get the benefit of a budget of what we call the funding floor, $30,175 dollars, all right, for your 5-year budget. All right, so here's the big, the date we wait for every year. It's the 471 window. So the window will open on January 21st at noon, okay? And then it is scheduled to close on April 1st at basically right before midnight, 11:59 p.m. All right, so that's our filing period. So now that we know the 471 deadline, right? Because when we file the bidding form, the Form 470, that has to be out there for a minimum of 28 days. So that on the 29th day, you're evaluating the bids, right? And choosing your vendor. All right. So in order to meet the 471 deadline of April 1st, we count back 29 days, right? So that gives us a 470 deadline of March 4th. All right. So again, the 470, that's the form we're looking at today. Deadline to get that filed is March 4th. Now, you obviously, if at all possible, do not wait that long, because if you do, that means on the last day of the 471 filing window, right, you're evaluating the bids, you're choosing a vendor, you're signing a contract if that's needed, and then trying to get into the portal to file the 471 application. And I have said this for years because I've been in that situation before. If you find yourself filing on the last day, it's not a good day to be you. All right. It's quite crazy. All right. It's doable, right? Just don't give yourself the extra heartburn. Okay, so 470, like I said, this is what we're focusing on. Just another reminder here, 470, this is that bidding form. This is to let vendors know that you want pricing. Now, we're talking today about category 2, all right, all around category 2, because that's where the changes are with the eligible service list. So, category 2 means anything under internal connections, which is the actual, connectivity equipment, router switches, access points, structured cabling, right? A firewall, a UPS to power a firewall, a switch, a router, right? That's what we call internal connections. There's also MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Service. This is where you're paying a third-party company to do that monitoring management of your network. And then basic maintenance. And it's all around this basic maintenance, right, where we're seeing the changes, the welcome changes. Now, the 470 itself acts as an RFP, a request for proposal, all right? But you can also have an RFP document. It can be as simple as just a spreadsheet saying, here's a preferred make and model of access points, of switches, whatever equipment that you're looking for, right? And here's the quantity that we're looking for. It could be as simple as that. All right, just know that any document that you upload attached to the 470, the portal refers to it as an RFP. Now, one of the E-rate, I'm going to say cardinal rules, is that if something is not listed on a 470, you cannot move forward and get it funded on the 471. We will talk about an exception here. All right. And again, that filing deadline, March 4th, right, for the 470. Okay, now with E-rate, we have to apply every year, all right? But the 470 is the only form, in I'll say the four biggies, that we don't necessarily have to file annually, right? You only file a 470. Let's say you have a multi-year contract for MIBS, right, for that management service, and that contract is set to expire this coming June 30th, and you want to renew it, right? You want to, go through that service again. All right. So, if the current contract, if that contract will cover at least through this upcoming funding year, meaning July 1, 2026 to June 30th, 2027, right, you would not have to file a 470 for that service because you're already under contract. All right. So you would only file a 470 if it's a new contract, right, that you want to enter, or if it's new equipment, all right, new services. All the other forms, the 471, the 486, the reimbursement forms, those have to be filed every year, right? If you want E-rate funding. All right. Now, I did mention that there's a bidding exemption, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. This is a question I get often this time of year. If I file a 470, does that mean I'm on the hook to move forward, right? Am I obligated to buy this equipment? You are not. All right, because I've had some vendors and I've gotten calls from schools and libraries, the last few weeks saying, do I really have to move forward? The vendor saying I do, that I'm obligated to buy. Okay, the whole point of a 470 is to get pricing, to determine is this something you can afford, right? If you ask for 100 APs and you look at the cost, you may decide to lower that quantity, right, or not purchase at all. So again, the whole point of the 470 is to get the pricing to decide, do you want to move forward? Okay, so here's that exemption. So this was something that was implemented a couple of years ago, all right? But if this only applies to libraries, right? The schools don't get this benefit, right? But if you're looking for anything under category 2 equipment, all right, again, the access points, the switches, and so on. If the what we call pre-discount cost, is $3,600 or less per library branch. All right, it's not library system wide, it's per branch. So if it's less than the $3,600, you don't have to file the bidding form, right? You don't have to file the 470. You would still move forward and file the 471. All right, but you do not have to go out to bid. You could, contact your preferred vendor, make sure they participate in E-rate, meaning that they have a SPIN, a service provider identification number. Then when you file the 471, you're just going to list the equipment, right, that's on that quote. All right, because the FCC says that this is already, cost effective if it's at $3,600 or less. All right, you still have to, sign a contract or sign off on a quote, right, indicating that this is the quote that we, that we've accepted. We do that before the 471. You still have to do that piece. But let me know if you have questions there. Okay, a couple of things with the 470. And again, another reminder, if you went through the 470 training, we do have the ability, this was a change implemented last year, so this is still fairly new. Since the 470, you don't necessarily file this each year. All right, just know that if you file a 470 and maybe you didn't upload an RFP document, and then you decide after the fact you need to upload some clarifying information. So the 470 is now, the portal has now been programmed that we can go in after the fact and upload that documentation. Just be aware, right? If you're uploading something that is somehow changing the service, the equipment, all right, we call that, is that a cardinal change? Is it changing the request in any way, right? We call that a cardinal change. And the rule is if you provide additional information that changes your request. Like maybe you're increasing the quantity. Maybe you realize I forgot to put the UPS on my, on my form, right? That's changing what you're asking for. So that restarts your 28-day waiting period. All right. My whole point to all of that. The portal it will actually ask you, is this changing your service somehow? And when you indicate yes, it's going to recalculate what we call the allowable contract date, right? In order for you to meet that 28-day, it resets your 28-day waiting period. All right, and thank you for that comment, Christine. All right. Now, here's the other piece that was added last year, the ability to cancel a 470. All right. And then you can also go back and view the canceled forms. In the past, we could not cancel a 470 on our own. USAC was very hesitant to cancel. They would, but it would still show up sometimes in the portal. Some vendors would still send you quotes, right? Well, now we have the ability, if you file a 470 in error, right? Maybe you realize, okay, I need to gather some additional information and I'm going to refile maybe next week, right? Or we don't want pricing at all. We've decided we're not going to, we're not going to move forward, right, with the upgrade. All right. We can go in and cancel the 470. So hopefully that will, stop the vendors from sending you the quotes. Okay, so here are the new program rules. Now, you may have questions about this that we don't have answers for yet, right? So, if you do have a question I can't answer, I'm gathering those. We do have the state E-rate coordinators. We have a call with USAC next Tuesday. So we'll be, basically asking those questions. All right. But this was actually on Thursday afternoon. The week before Christmas, all right, the Christmas holiday, the FCC released the eligible service list. We wait every year for this to come out. This year it was greatly delayed because there were some changes they were looking at, right? And then also the government shutdown, right? The FCC staff were furloughed. So everything has gotten delayed a bit. All right, but the eligible service list was adopted. And if you pull up the PDF, there's a hyperlink there if you want to pull up the actual, language, right? The actual document. So the big change here is that if you are purchasing what we call, remote maintenance, remote support, that when we say remote, it's this, it's a type where it allows for you to go, say, to the manufacturer's website, and you can pull down bug fixes, patches, firmware updates. There's a help desk, customer service desk that you can reach out to, right? Where everything is remote. right? In the past, right, such as this current funding year, you had to ask for that under basic maintenance with all the basic maintenance rules that were really messy. Okay. The other issue that we've experienced with this is that, let's say you have a wireless controller or access points that require a license. When you initially get the license with new equipment, that license is just what we call right to use. It's basically the operating system. Okay. But let's say, that initial license covers a 3-year period. All right. Well, at the end of that 3 years, you need to renew your license. Typically, manufacturers will bundle this remote type support in with the license. So that's where we've had lots of issues is when you're doing that license renewal, USAC or the FCC insisted this had to be funded under basic maintenance. All right. So like I said, it caused lots of issues, and I'll talk about what those issues were. All right. And how this will help. All right. So now, if you are, just purchasing, think about if you're familiar with SmartNet Basic, right, where it really is just that most basic remote type support. If you're purchasing that or a renewal license that includes support, that will now be funded under internal connections. All right. So again, this is a big change and a welcome change, right? Because again, it's caused so many issues. Okay, so just so you understand some of those issues and how this will improve, if when you're doing let's say that right to use license, right, that initial subscription for that new equipment, when a license would fall under what we call internal connections, and it covered a multi-year period, you could go ahead, let's say, do a 5-year license. You could pay for all 5 years up front, go ahead and pay, you pay for all 5 years, then you could file for reimbursement for that lump sum, right? Because it fit under internal connections. However, when you went to do the renewal, that was classified as basic maintenance. With the basic maintenance rules, even if we had to pay for that 5 years up front, we could only ask E-rate to basically, we had to prorate it, right? We had to do what's called, an amortization, where let's say that 5 years, let's say it's $10,000, we could only ask E-rate to cover $2,000 per year. It was treated like a multi-year contract. All right. So that meant you had to wait, 4 or 5 years to get your reimbursement because you had to pay for that full cost up front. All right. Please let me know if that did not make sense. But again, this is where it's caused so many issues. Because the other issue is, let's say in year 2 or 3 of that subscription renewal, you filed the 471, but you paid for it, let's say 2 years prior. When you went to file for reimbursement, we hit a brick wall. Well, you paid for this 2 years ago. Again, just lots of issues. All right. So that, again, this is why, we were pushing the FCC to make this very important change. Now, if you look at this last bullet here, please keep in mind, do not confuse this remote support versus on-site support. All right. So on-site support, basically that includes time and material where you have a technician come on site. If you are purchasing that type plan, right, you have that type contract, that will still fall under this subcategory called basic maintenance with all those basic maintenance rules. All right. Now, when it is on site, that what we call break fix, right? Time and material. Let's say your contract is $10,000 a year. All right. That's the estimated cost, right, for this service. When it's time and material, we have to keep a maintenance log, right? Because E-rate does not fund what we call insurance policies. So you would have to keep a maintenance log that says, okay, out of this 10,000, we had this one occurrence with this one switch, a tech came on site, and the cost for that was $2,000. You would only be reimbursed based on the $2,000 if that was the only occurrence, even though it cost you 10,000. All right. I know this is really in the weeds, right? But this is just so you understand. These are the rules around basic maintenance. So if you are doing the on-site, the time and material, just be prepared that you may not, more than likely not, get reimbursed for what you actually paid for. All right. Because again, E-rate will not cover an insurance policy type coverage. Now, here's the other biggie. So I mentioned that, from our current funding year, right, previous, that if you did that license renewal, right, or multi-year, remote type support, where you had to do that amortization. Okay, well, let's say 2026 is going to be year 2, year 3, right, of that multi-year support. All right. So what we will be allowed to do is that for FY 2026, when you file the 471, you're going to point to the 470, that you file back whenever you move forward and purchase that subscription. So look at, do you have, 4 years left on that? Do you have 3 years left on it? When you file the 471, you can go ahead and ask for the balance of that, right? So whatever that proration, all right, look at how many years you have left, and you can go ahead, put that full amount, right? Whatever's remaining, put that on the 471. Once you get the funding letter, you can go ahead and file for reimbursement, all right, for that balance. All right. Because again, this was our first question when the FCC said, yes, we've approved this change. And we're like, well, hold up. What about the ones that are already in this proration? Right. How do we handle that? Yeah. And to be able to get the funding for the whole contract in a single year. This is sorry. Some of us had happy dances because it's caused so much heartburn. Okay. So again, this is a big deal. Now, it also gives you the option if you decide, well, okay, no, I really like E-rate and I'm going to file a 471 every year, right? And continue with the proration. You can do that if you choose. All right. That's your choice. All right. So again, please let me know if you have questions there. Okay. Now sorry, the last bullet here, another biggie. Because the E-rate rule has always been that when you file a 470, you have to make sure to ask for, the equipment, the service under the correct service type. Because when you go to file the 471, let's say you listed something under basic maintenance on the 470 and only under basic maintenance. On the 471, we were not allowed to get something covered if it really fits under internal connections. All right. So the FCC has waived that rule in this case. So if you filed for basic maintenance, right, for that remote service, that license renewal, and you only listed basic maintenance on the what we call the originating 470, you will still file the 471, but put it under internal connections. All right. You want to make sure you put it under internal connections so that the internal connections rules kick in. All right. But the FCC has instructed USAC, do not deny a funding request because they didn't ask for this under internal connections on that 470. Okay. So again, the FCC has waived the rule here. All right, to be able to implement this change. All right, now I'm going to just show you the 470 because here's the thing, right? We just found out, like I said, just what 2.5, 3 weeks ago about this, the change. The current version of the 470 that's out there that we're using now to file for 2026 has not been updated, and the FCC will not be updating it, right, for this upcoming funding year. There's just no time to get that updated. Plus, people have already been in actively filing 470s, so they really can't change it at this point. All right, so we're going to be using the current version of the 470. So I'm going to show you how to request if you need to do that remote service or that license renewal. How do I ask for this on the 470? All right, to make sure everything is as correct as possible. All right. So when we go into Epic, we always start with the nickname, right? None of this has changed. All right. The save and continue. It's going to say, okay, here's how many entities are within your library system, right? Just, verify that's correct. Save and continue. Now, I do want to, again, just another reminder, if you're going through and filing the form and for some reason you have to stop, right? Maybe you get interrupted, right? And you come back and the portal's timed out. You can pick up where you left off. But the way we do that is we come up to that blue menu bar and we click where it says tasks. All right. And you look for a task that says create 470. That means that you've created it, you've started it. All right. But it hasn't been submitted yet. All right. So this is how you get back into that form. The reason I stress this is oftentimes people don't realize this is how you get back in. So they simply start another 470. So you may have multiple forms out there. Well, then the portal starts sending annoying emails letting you know there's an incomplete form. But that typically doesn't happen until after the form's deadline. All right. Causes a lot of panic. So again, this is where you get back into the form. Okay, now it's going to ask, are you the main contact? It's based on whoever logged in. Yes, their information will be posted. Now, I apologize if I'm going through this quickly. Let me know if you have questions. All right, now this is where on the 470, it's going to ask, are you applying for category 1 and or category 2? Remember, with the 470, when you go to file it, if you know you need both a Cat 1 service, your internet bandwidth, right, as well as anything under category 2, you can put both of those requests on the same 470. That is not a problem. I actually got a call yesterday from a school district where a vendor was insisting, oh no, you're required to file 2 separate 470s. All right, that is not the case. 470s, you can put Cat 1 and Cat 2 requests on the same form. All right, so in this case, I'm only asking for category 2. All right, so I'm going to choose that option there. Save and continue. Now, this is where the system is asking, is there an RFP for any of the services you're requesting? All right, so if you have that simple spreadsheet, if you're looking for new equipment, it could be a simple spreadsheet. If you're asking for MIBS for your existing equipment, the vendors need to know what kind of equipment and the quantities you currently have, right? So you could upload, a simple spreadsheet that says, here is our existing equipment. We have X number of switches. Here's the make and model, X number of APs, make and model, right? So that way they know what equipment you need managed. Again, that would be referred to as an RFP document. So indicate yes or no. If you answer no, very easy, you just move on. If you indicate yes, upload the document. And it could be multiple documents. All right, just get them all uploaded. All right, so we'll click on save and continue. And again, just a quick sample. The reason I share this is, again, another E-rate, a major rule here. If you are uploading any documentation, all right, as an RFP, any documentation that you upload, anytime you state a specific make and model, the E-rate rule is you have to follow it up with or equivalent, all right, because you have to consider equivalent equipment, all right, equivalent, models. If you leave that language off, USAC says, oh, this wasn't fair and open, right? Because you said you only wanted this specific manufacturer and this specific model, all right? So that means that it's not fair to other vendors who don't sell that specific, manufacturer. Do yourself a favor, put the darn language in there, the or equivalent. All right, so once you get the documents uploaded, then this, and you click on save and continue, then the system's going to say, okay, you uploaded these documents. Does this apply to Cat 1 or Cat 2? You still have to check the boxes, even if you only said, I'm only putting Cat 2 on here, right? We still have to come over to the Cat 2 section here where it's labeled, and we check each of the boxes that we're saying, yes, these RFPs relate to some category 2 service that will be on this form. All right, so check the boxes. All right, save and continue. Okay, so this is where we start the really adding kind of the meat of the 470. We're adding, the equipment, the services that we want pricing for. Even if you upload a document, right, that details the make, model, the type equipment, the quantities. Even though you've uploaded that documentation, you still have to build this table, right, to say, I'm looking for access points, I'm looking for switches. Because when a service provider, they can go out and search for your 470, the first thing they're going to see is the types of, the function that you're looking for to know, is this something, that I want to respond to? All right, because if you say that you're looking for a firewall and it's a company that doesn't sell firewalls, they're not going to spend the time looking at your 470. All right, so that's why you have to make sure everything's listed in this table that we'll build. All right, so we do that by clicking on Add New Service Request. Now, when we click on Add New Service Request, it's going to say, okay, well, which service are you looking for? Now, when we look at this, all right, there are 3 options here. Give me a second here. Sorry, my phone was ringing in the background. All right, so we see the three options. The first one does not use the language internal connections, but this is really what it is. I seek bids for the equipment needed for broadband connectivity within school and libraries, or related software and right to use license. As I mentioned, the 470 has not been updated, so there's no mention of support here, right? Remote support. We should see that next year. All right. But again, if you're looking for that license renewal that will include support, or just a remote support contract, right, you're going to choose that first option. Second option is that basic maintenance, but here it is, you would only choose basic maintenance if you're looking for that time and material on site. All right. And I took the liberty, right, of putting this red line through here because it talks about bug fixes, software updates. That's what we defined as this remote. All right. Like I said, the portal, the form will be updated. Okay, so again, option 2 would be for that on-site time and material maintenance, and option 3 would be for MIBS, the Managed Internal Broadband Service. Now, when you're asking for the renewal license, or anything that includes that remote support, the way we'll ask for this is you select the type equipment that the license are tied to, right? So is the license tied to a firewall that you have, right? Is it tied to your access points, the wireless controller? Okay, choose the type equipment, right, that the license supports. All right, so if we're asking for license for, maybe we have Meraki access points, right, and we want to do another 5-year subscription, I would come down and choose wireless access points. All right, now again, the language says and necessary support and license. That will be updated to also include remote support. Just pretend like it's already there. All right, so I'm going to choose the wireless access points. All right, so the function will show up there. So it's going to ask for the quantity. Well, how many APs are you looking for license for? In this case, I said 100. You choose just like you would like as if you were buying new equipment, right? Choose the manufacturer. Okay, now I apologize. This is if you're asking for just the APs. I apologize. It's the first time I run through this. Okay, this is if you're asking for the actual APs. So we said, yep, we're looking for the APs. Here's the make and mod or the manufacturer. Now it does ask, do you want installation on this? All right. If you think you might want to have somebody install it, indicate yes. You could always change your mind, right? If you indicate no, E-Rate's not going to move forward and pay any of the install cost. Now, if this is new equipment that you want to go ahead and purchase, right, an on-site maintenance agreement, right, because it's a sensitive piece of equipment, you can't afford it being down, right? You can check this box here that says, please select if you want the basic maintenance. When you check this box, this is only applies to that on-site time and material type maintenance. Now, anytime you indicate yes, you actually are looking for the function of maintenance. It's going to ask you how many entities will be served. All right. So if you have 4 library, your main library and 3 branches, right, you would indicate this is for those 4 sites. All right, and we save that. All right, now the system will show us, this is the table I mentioned. So it's going to show us, okay, you asked for service type of internal connections and APs. You asked for maintenance, basic maintenance for those APs. Now, if you realize you put something on there in error, you can check the box there to the left, and then you'll get the option to either edit, maybe you put in the wrong quantity, or to remove it. Okay, now get myself caught up here. So this is what it looks like if you're asking for that renewal license, okay, or that remote support. So again, choose a type equipment the license is tied to. I apologize for getting ahead of myself there. All right, so here's our access points. This time under manufacturer, instead of saying, okay, this is say for a Meraki access point, we're going to basically indicate other. It's a very long list. You go all the way down to the bottom, choose the very last option, label as other, and it's going to give you a new text box. All right. So here I said we are seeking license and remote support for our existing 100 Meraki MR42 APs, right? Whatever that make and model. All right. Now, because we're asking for license renewal or remote support, right, and or, right, for existing equipment, there's no problem with us, stating a specific make and model because we already have that equipment. We do not have to add that or equivalent language. All right, perfectly fine there. Now, we do not have to check the basic maintenance box, right, because we're only asking for the remote, right, type service. All right, and we've already indicated that here, and it's going to be covered under internal connections. All right, so we'll click on Save Request. Okay, now if you are asking for, let's say you already have an existing switch or a firewall, whatever that equipment, and you do want that on-site time and material maintenance, all right, so here we're going to choose that second option, right, which is basic maintenance. Similar to what we saw with internal connections, we have to choose the type equipment that we want this on-site maintenance for. So let's say it's a router, all right? I choose router. Now here it's pretty simple, right? We said, yep, we want, basic maintenance, which means the on-site. Okay, well, how many routers do you have within your library system that you want, maintained, right? You put in the quantity, you choose the manufacturer, and then how many entities. All right. Now, this is where it would be important. If you are asking for that on-site maintenance for existing equipment, I would upload an RFP document, a spreadsheet, right? A PDF, whatever that says, here are the existing make and models, right, of the equipment we want this on-site maintenance for. All right. Because again, vendors would need to know that. All right. So once we supply that, save and continue. Now, real quick here, just this is what it looks like if you are going to ask for MIBS. We covered this before when we did 470 training, but when you select that, basically that third option, right? When you select that, you're indicating that on that management monitoring of the network, and then it's going to ask, okay, is this maintenance for, or excuse me, management of new equipment, right, that you're going to lease as part of the service? We're allowed to do that, where the vendor just rolls in the cost of that equipment, say the access points, along with the license, the management, it all gets rolled in together. Are you looking for that type of service, or are you looking for management of your existing equipment? So if you already have the equipment installed, but now you're looking at contracting with a company to provide that management, indicate so, right? It's for my current equipment. Or maybe it's new equipment you're going to go ahead and buy out of, you want to buy it outright. You don't want this bundled into the service. All right. It's either equipment you already own or will own. All right. And then you say, okay, yep, this is for my existing equipment and how many entities. Nowhere in any of these options does it allow us to indicate the equipment we want monitored, managed. Again, that's where you would want to upload a spreadsheet or whatever to say, here is our existing equipment, all right, that we would like to be managed. And we save that. All right. So again, just keep building that table. If there's multiple things that you want, make sure that it's listed in that table. Remember, I refer to this as a wish list. So just because it's on this list doesn't mean you have to move forward and purchase, right? Or if you put a quantity, right, you're not held to that. Now, you do want to be careful in the quantity. Make sure you put the quantity high enough, right? Maybe build in a little fudge factor there, right? Because maybe you think, well, I think we need 100 new APs, but I'm not really sure. The USAC will allow us to increase that. So if we really only need it, or we need to say 102, 103, that's fine. But if you realize I need 125, they're not going to fund the excess. All right. They will not tell us a percentage that we can go over. Right. So again, you want to make sure, like I said, build in a little bit of a fudge factor there. All right. Again, make sure everything's there. Now, in the narrative, you can, if you did not upload an RFP document, you can detail the information in the narrative, right? It may be easier to do that if you're just asking, say, for, a renewal license for, just a handful of APs, right? Where, it's pretty simple. All right. Again, it's up to you. So here I said, we're seeking access points and network drops, detail whatever whatever you're looking for. But I did say, see the attached RFP document for a list of sites and addresses, for a list of the equipment. I like to make it clear that vendors have to go out and look for that RFP document to get the information. All right. It's giving them the heads up. They need to go this additional step to look for that RFP. All right. This is also where if there's any bidding rules, any disqualification factors, you want to make sure and state it here. So things like, any equipment has to be compatible with your existing infrastructure. All right. So again, you can detail that information there. All right. So once we have that, save and continue. Now on the form, it will ask, we've already indicated the main contact. We did that, when we started the form. Well, now it does ask, is there an additional technical contact person? The initial contact has to have a portal account. You have to have an account, be able to log into the portal. For the technical contact, this individual does not have to have a portal account. So if you indicate yes, if they do have a portal account, you can just click on search, start typing in their name, right? It'll populate all the information. If they don't have a portal account, click where it says enter details manually. All right, pretty straightforward. All right, and then we save that. Now, the form does ask about state or local procurement requirements. A lot of this, I copy and paste from what I put in the narrative, right? I like to, I recommend, and USAC recommends, putting those preferences and disqualification factors in the narrative, but also under state or local procurement requirements, because the form does say, or restrictions on how or when service providers may contact you or any other bidding procedures. All right. So if it's something where maybe you're looking at doing a total refresh, right, of your connectivity equipment, you could require vendors to come and do an on-site, a walkthrough, and you make that mandatory. So if a vendor does not show up for that walkthrough, you've already told them you're going to be disqualified. Right. So again, the E-rate rule is if something's going to get a vendor disqualified, they have to know that up front. All right. So again, just state that. We also want to state the deadline for the vendors to respond. If you want to start, your plan is to start evaluating bids on that 29th day, state that, right? Applicants reserve the right to reject bids that were received on or after the allowable contract date. That's that 29th day. All right, because USAC says, if you don't state that deadline, let's say it's 45 days after you submitted the 470, but you've not evaluated the bids yet. On that, let's say on the 44th day, you got yet another bid, you would have to pull that bid in and consider that one as well. All right, because you did not state a deadline. All right, so to finish this off, we click on review. Now, this is a document, just to point out here, I have this out on my website under the resource library. I'm strange, I collect bid disqualifying factors, all right, things you might want to include on the 470, things like that, compatibility, all right, some details there, require a mandatory walkthrough. Another piece here, the discounted billing, how do you want to get your E-rate funding? Do you want a discounted bill? Or do you want to pay for it in full and then you're going to file what's called the bear form? All right. So basically you could put that if you are adamant, you want a discounted bill, you want them to charge you, let's say your discount rate is 80%, you want them to charge you for the balance, the 20%, and then it falls on the service provider to file the paperwork to get the 80%, you can make that a bid requirement. And thank you, Christine. Now, just a heads up, we have been told that the 471 will have some changes as well. One of the changes is that when we file the 471, we're going to indicate what is your reimbursement preference. So start thinking about that now, right? So for each funding request, because you could have multiple funding requests on a single 471, say purchasing things from two different companies, right? Two different vendors. For each of those vendors, each of those funding requests, we'll have to indicate, all right, do you want to file the bear, meaning paying, like I said, in full and then filing for reimbursement, or do you want the vendor to give you the discount? All right, that's going to be added to the 471. All right, I know that's one of several changes. All right, that'll be coming. All right, like I said, just a heads up. Okay, now once you click on that review, it will basically kick you out of the 470. To get back in, to be able to actually certify it, submit it, we have to go up to that blue menu bar and click on task. This time though, we're looking for something that says certify 470. All right, and it'll show the nickname you gave it. We'll click there. All right. Now, the system will generate a draft version of that 470. You'll see it here where it says download document link, right? So PDF copy, pull that up, check it over, right? It's going to show, everything you put in that table, the quantities, everything you put in the narrative, state and local bidding requirements. All right. All that's going to be, listed there. Check to make sure everything's correct. If you realize that you made a mistake, maybe you left something off the table or, wrong quantity, just start clicking on back. You have to go back one screen at a time until you get to that page, right? Or whatever section you need to make the correction. All right. Now, once you see that, yep, everything is correct, we have to check the box right below that saying, yes, I certify the information is correct. All right. And then we can certify. Now there are two options. It's send for certification or continue to certification. If you are a full right user in the program, that means you have the right, right? You have the rights within the system to fill out the form as well as certify it. If you're a partial right user, you have the ability to fill out all those fields on the form, but you cannot complete the certification piece. So you will only see the option for send for certification. And I say this repeatedly, if you are clicking on send for certification, it's going to send it to, whoever is the full right user in the portal, such as the account administrator, right? It's going to send them an email to let them know there's something they need to complete. But that may wind up in their spam folder, or they may see the email and not understand, what it is they have to do. And I've actually seen applicants over the years miss the deadline because, right, the person did not, this other person did not go in and complete the certification. So again, heads up, make darn sure that they complete that. All right, so here I'm going to say, yep, we're full rights. I'll click on continue to certification. Yes, I want to proceed. And you're going to see boxes here. For the 470, all of those boxes have to be checked. All right, you cannot leave any of those blank. All of them have to be checked. All right, and then you come down and you click on certify. When you do that, you'll get the pop-up, penalty for false statements, all of that, right? Click on yes. All right, and certify it. Now, a couple of things here. Once you file the 470, I have noticed this filing season, we had the same issue last year. This year, it seems to be a little worse, where when you file a 470, it can take several minutes for your 470 status to switch over from incomplete to certified. All right. And the issue that we've had where the portal, right, had it glitched and it never switched over to certified. Right. It just sat there in that incomplete status. Well, it's not really done until it says certified. All right. So what I suggest to you is after you certify the form, from the landing page there in the portal, if you go all the way down to the very bottom, that very bottom section, it says FCC forms and post commitment request. The default form is the 470, so that should already be displayed. Click on the pull down and choose 2026, our upcoming funding year. And then you're going to see the nickname. Whatever nickname you gave it will be the hyperlink. All right, but read across to the far right, it's going to give you the status. Make sure it does say certified. All right, if it says incomplete, refresh your browser. I had to do that the other day where it took almost 5 minutes and I had to refresh several times. All right, so again, just a heads up there. Now, if you want to go back and look at that 470, you want to, generate a copy of this to share with someone else, click on the nickname. All right, one of the first things you want to, again, check, make note of, when you click on the nickname, here toward the top, you're going to see the section that says allowable contract date. That is that 29th day. All right, verify that date. Make all the decision makers, make this known. This is the earliest date that we can start evaluating bids. Because if you start that process early, if this happens, say even the day before, you're not going to get funded. All right, that's a program violation. All right, so again, make note of that date. All right, then you can scroll down and it's going to show you everything you put in that table. Verify everything is correct. Now, if you see that, maybe there's some additional information that you need to upload, I mentioned you can go in and add an RFP, all right? To do that, when you're looking at that summary, okay, of that 470, you'll see some menu options. Click where it says related actions, all right, and you'll get this, the secondary menu. Now, there's several things here. You can edit the nickname, right? You can change the nickname if you want. You can change the main contact or the technical contact. That's not a problem. It's not going to affect that 28-day waiting period, right? That's just a clerical, correction. All right, but we would click here if we want to add additional information, if we want to add that RFP document. The very last option is where if we want to cancel. But if I click on Add RFP Document, all right, even before I upload, it's going to ask, does this new RFP constitute a substantial change, all right, to the 470? So like I said, if you're changing quantity, if you're adding a, additional model, that's changing your service, all right? So you would indicate yes. When you do that, then it's going to say, right, here's your new allowable contract date. It'll recalculate that 28-day waiting period. Then we see the option for upload. So if it's multiple documents, right, just upload those. Now, it will ask you when you, after you upload, right, you're going to see that table. You have to check the box to the left of each of the items where this change or this additional information will impact, right? So if you're changing, say, the quantity of the APs, but you have other equipment listed in the table, you would just check the item for APs, okay? So once you've waited the 28 days, again, really important that you do the bid evaluation. If you receive 2 or more bids, make sure you get this done. Price always has to be the highest weighted factor. It's up to you to come up with the point spread as long as you can show that price has the highest number of points. All right. So any of those other things you put on the form, like, product eligibility, or excuse me, compatibility. All right. Your reimbursement preference, all right, any of those preferences, right, plug those in, do that evaluation. Now, again, another document out on my resource library page. There is, it's a Word doc. It's a 2-page document. There's a bid evaluation template for both Category 1 and Category 2. You're welcome to go out, grab it, tweak it however you need. Now, one of the things I've added on there, it's where you can sign and date, right? So this way you can clearly show, yes, we did this bid evaluation piece before we awarded our contract, chose our vendor, and then moved forward to the 471. All right. Now, if you get a quote, say for hardware, and there's no place for you to sign on that quote, you could just squeeze in your signature anywhere on that document, right? You could do this bid evaluation, sign and date it, and attach it to that quote. It's up to you. Bid evaluation, this is something we typically keep in our files, though. This is something that if you get audited, right, you'll have to be able to show an auditor that you completed this step. And thank you, Christine, for putting the URL out there. Okay, those are the 470 changes. I know it's a lot of information in a short period of time. Any questions at all?
I'm all right. Thumbs up from Carl. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
I have to say, Lori, and Josh, thank you too.
Thanks,
I have to say, Lori, it's good that you did a close reading of the news brief from USAC on December 18th, because I missed the fact that on the 471 we get to indicate our billing, our invoicing preference. That just totally went. I must have been in full holiday mode. So,
hey, I get it. Yeah. Yeah, because they put this information in the news brief. It was also in there about the, if you already, are doing that proration, for the license renewal. There was just that little blurb in the news brief, which I actually initially missed. I was drafting a question to USAC, and realized, well, let me go back and look at that news brief again, and then found it buried. To me, it felt buried down in that document. So
Yeah, there was a lot
there
in
was a lot
there.
in there.
And
Yeah,
so
a lot
yeah,
done.
this year is going to be weird because of the late change to the ESL and not everything updated on the 470 to match with that.
Yeah,
Um, so feel free if you have questions, folks, make sure you ask them. Better to ask the question than to regret not asking later.
yeah.
Um,
And here's every possible way that you can reach out to me, right? That you can reach out to Christine. If it's something that, like I said, we don't know the answer to, we know typically where to go find it.
right.
Keep in mind um, some of it yet to be decided. So and this is typical. Anytime they come out with a change like this, there may be some nuances that they didn't, the FCC didn't think about. So yeah, so any new information, I'll put that out on the listserv, and definitely share the information with you.
Yeah. And if you aren't signed up for Lori's list, please do that. But I do make sure I pop that out to the Open Tech and Open List and Open Updates too. So hopefully you see that in all of the other communications that you get. Yeah, if you have any issues with getting Lori's emails directly, please subscribe again. No harm in doing that.
None
Um,
at all. None
and
at all.
yeah, this year is especially weird with the delays for the shutdown.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's always a little bit of lag or clarification time, but everything feels a little extra odd because of the shutdown period.
Yeah, because even, USAC, up until even the week before the dates were announced, we were being told, oh no, they're going to be like a
Oh,
week before.
yes.
Very, very adamant. It's almost you can count on this. And then when it came out and everything's been pushed back, um, the changes being announced, but oh, by the way, we're not going to be changing the form. Well, that's going to cause confusion. Yeah, it's going to be a strange year.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Seriously, the USAC folks were telling their board up until the very end, oh, we don't expect this to change any of the dates, and lo and behold, it did.
Lo and behold, it did.
So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if if it feels weird to you, it is weird.
It is weird. It is weird. And there was no heads up about like this thing on the 471 with, indicating your reimbursement
Mm-mm.
method. And it's okay. So when you put that on the 471, what if we change our mind? What if something happens? So that we don't, it's not programmed yet, but they said it will be coming. The ability to go in and do basically a change, right? To say, no, I want to change that method. It's not in the portal yet, but that will be coming. But it will mean an additional step that you would have to complete if you decide you need to change that reimbursement mode. So it will need some additional work that we weren't anticipating.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if that means that vendors who have had their own form for that, like I'm thinking of one vendor in
Mhm.
particular
In
who
particular,
required
yes.
you to at the time of contract say, I want Bear, I want Spy, if they're going to continue that as well.
Yeah, that's my hope, is that that part will go away. Um,
Yeah,
I am hoping. We
yeah,
live in hope. Um,
yeah.
and just so everyone knows, we are working on, because everything was delayed. We're still working on coming up with the 471 training dates. And just so you know, we're not given access to the new version of the form typically until the window opens. We've asked USAC, because there is a training site that the state coordinators that we use. We've asked them to put the new form in there ahead of time. That's probably, it's wishful thinking, because if they're actively updating the form. Um, so my point to all of that, if the window doesn't open until the 21st, then I've got to be able to go in and do all the gather the screenshots and, incorporate those changes in my training materials. But we are working on coming up with the 471 training dates. And I strongly encourage, folks to attend that. The 471, I call that the Mac Daddy of the forms because it's the most complicated to fill out. It's not that it's really hard. There's just a lot of fields, a lot of information you need to be prepared to provide. That's my
Yeah,
training
and
plug.
yeah, and as far as the training for the 471, that ball is in my court. Yesterday was a busy day, so hopefully we will get that announced very soon.
Yes. Yep. It just know that it is coming. I know from the school sites, I've already been getting questions. Well, will you be doing training? When will we know the date? So,
Yeah. All right. So Lori and I have been talking for a minute or two. Hopefully that gave you a chance to think of any questions or decide that you don't have any. Either way, or maybe that you're just so overwhelmed you need to sit with this all for a minute. That is also a legitimate response to these changes. I think overall these changes are good, though.
they are all,
I'm very, very happy about them.
yeah. I mean,
So
yeah. I mean, especially with this remote support, we've been asking for a number of years. And every year it just kept getting worse.
yeah.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words and for attending.
All right. Well, I think I am going to stop the recording.